Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Mom Street USA. I am your host, Jackie, and on today's episode, we are talking about something that is very important to a Disney vacation, but something that so many of us don't necessarily enjoy doing, and that is budgeting. So, the goal for today is to give you a realistic idea of what a Disney budget breakdown looks like. So that way it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming because it can absolutely feel overwhelming. There are so many little details and things to consider when it comes to making your budget for Disney. So, we're going to break it down into some smaller categories to help you find like a happy range that your bank account can handle for a Disney trip. So, for the purpose of this episode, I'm going to walk you through the process of each step, but your own needs and family size and all of that will also vary based on you, right? So, I'm not going to be able to go over every single different makeup of a family need and budget range in this episode. So, my hope is that it will help you be able to think through each step. So that way, when you are planning for your trip, you can adjust what you need and then follow along with your family of whatever size. So that way, you kind of have at the end of this episode, you can have an idea of a breakdown for what looks realistic for your group. Now, I am a crazy lady when it comes to planning Disney trips. So I like to track everything whenever we do our big family trips. I don't do this as much on my solo trips because I just try to do those kind of as cheaply as possible. But for my family trips, I like to track everything on spreadsheets because I am that type of person. And I don't do anything super fancy. I just have a couple columns, and each category that we're going to talk about here in this episode in a moment just gets its own column. And I make notes or I type different things into it. And then I have an area where I can total all of the costs that I am anticipating in that particular section. So that is how I personally organize my budget. I know there are tons of different ways to do it. You can do a spreadsheet, you can handwrite it out if you prefer like the paper pencil method. It really just depends on your preference with that. But let's break down our budget into these categories to help keep it organized. So we're going to talk about tickets, food, travel, hotel, and then merch and souvenirs and extra costs at the end. So those are kind of our 5 categories that we're going to be working with for today's episode. So we're going to workshop some examples and look at some numbers as they are current. I'm recording this in June of 2026, and I'm going to use the first full week of September as reference. So that's kind of where we're looking like post Labor Day kind of range for pricing. Now, please remember that pricing does vary greatly based on the time of year. So the pricing that I'm going to see in September is going to be vastly different than the pricing that we see come December, right? Or even January, February. So it really, really varies. Sometimes it only varies by $10 or $20. Sometimes it varies by a couple $100. So keep that in mind. If you're on a really tight budget, I highly suggest doing some research on what times of year at Disney tend to run cheaper as far as like resorts go. That's going to be your biggest difference that you're going to see. The ticket prices are generally within 20 or so dollars, but the resort costs are going to be a massive difference depending on the time of year. So keep all of that in mind as we go through this because the numbers I give you may be very different than the numbers that you end up with depending on when you're looking at going. So we're going to start with tickets. This one, all of these are so dependent on your choices and what you want to do. But this one is highly based on the length of your stay, obviously. I always suggest with when you're planning for your tickets to have at least one rest day in the middle of your trip to help break up the long park days if you're able to. Now, you may have a short, quick trip that you just don't have the ability to do a full rest day. But I highly suggest at least having like a sleep in morning or a night that you don't stay out to do the fireworks or the evening show at whatever park you're at, because you will just exhaust yourself, especially if you've got littles that are going with you. You want to make sure that you are keeping tabs on how they're doing, prioritizing some rest for them, even if you're hoping to keep going, they may be telling you to slow down and not, right? So keep that in mind. And after that decision on how many park days you want to do, then the decision comes in whether or not you want to park hop. So that would be the other decision that you have to make based on your tickets. So this decision for me always depends on how many park days I have the ability to have based on the length of my stay, right? If I have 4 or more park days with my kiddos, especially when they were a little bit younger, now they've been more often now. We know more of what they like, what they don't like, so I can anticipate more how much time we're gonna need in each park. And currently, as much as it pains me to say I love Animal Kingdom, but the status of Animal Kingdom right now is really truly not a full day park. So that's something else to keep in mind until we get more things open with Tropical Americas. That park, you can easily do like 8 to 2 or 8 to 3 probably in that park, but it's definitely not a full day park. Now, you may use your Animal Kingdom day as your early evening or your partial rest day. Totally fine. So, again, things to consider with that. But if I have 4 or more park days, I will typically do 1 park per day because I don't see the need to hop around as much. If I have less than 4, I typically would consider hopping to be able to hit the highlights at each park. And again, it really just depends on the makeup of your group, what you think they're going to want to do. Do you have kiddos and adults that want to do thrill rides or not? All those little factors kind of play into those decisions that you might be making. Remember also with tickets that the more park days you have, the less you pay per day, which makes this decision even trickier depending on your trip. So let's look at a couple numbers. Again, this is based on that first full week in September. If you're doing a 3-day ticket, that is a park hopper. Because, like I said, if you're doing less than 4, I would suggest looking at a park hopper. A 3-day park hopper ticket is going to be 476.07 for adults and 462.24 for kids ages 3 to 9. Now, a 4-day base ticket, so 4 days, 1 park per ticket is what the base ticket is. 513.96 for adults, 496.22 for kids ages 3 to 9. So there's a 40-ish dollar difference between those two. So a 3-day hopper to a 4-day base ticket, you're only paying $40 more. Now, a 4-day hopper ticket, you're looking at 598.96. So that's a more significant jump. And then for kids ages 3 to 9 is 581.22 with that. So that's going to be a more expensive cost. But then let me throw this at you. If you want to do a 5-day base ticket, it is actually cheaper than a 4-day park hopper. So you get an extra day and it's cheaper just because you don't have the ability to park hop. So a 5-day base ticket is 557.03 for adults, 537.86 for kids ages 3 to 9. So you see where you can really get into the weeds with these kind of ticket prices. So it's really just best to decide how many days you're going to be in the parks to start, and then you can compare a base ticket versus a park hopper ticket, depending on how many days, depending on what you want to do. So that's my suggestion with tickets. The nice thing about tickets is it's a fairly set cost, right? You're not going to have these numbers fluctuate by hundreds week to week. They may, like I said, fluctuate by $20 or $30, but they're not going to be a massive increase in your budget if you are debating about which weeks to go. So tickets are fairly set in those kinds of price ranges because they do depend a little bit now because Disney has more dynamic pricing for tickets than they've had in the past. So a little bit more now, it depends on what day you start your ticket, helps to set what the cost is going to be going forward. But after that, a 2-day ticket is pretty much the same, a 3-day ticket, week to week, again, other than some of those holiday, really, really busy times. So that's kind of the gist on tickets. Again, look at the length of your stay, try to factor in a rest day, and then see how many days you've got left over based on that. Let's move on now to food. There are so many different ways to do a food budget. with a Disney trip, and it really just depends on your preferences and what you guys like to do. This cost is going to be one that will vary greatly family to family, group to group, right? But this is also one that is not going to change hardly at all depending on the time of year that you go. So you don't really see at Disney like price increases for the standard like table service and quick service options around the holidays. They just don't raise their prices for those weeks. So they don't have really that dynamic pricing to have to look out for. So it really just depends on a couple different options that you have. So the first option I'm going to talk about is actually an option that we do with my family, and that is like a grocery delivery, packing some food option. So this is a method my family uses. We typically will do easy breakfast options like cereal, Pop Tarts, muffins in the room. And then we pack our lunches to take into the parks. Disney does allow full coolers and lunches to be taken into the parks. There are specifications on like the size of coolers you're allowed to take, so definitely check that out on the Disney website. And you are not allowed to take anything in glass containers, any alcohol, or any loose ice. But you can like bag your ice up from your resort if you need to a way to keep your stuff cool that's in your cooler. But it can't just be like loose ice in a cooler because of it's a safety hazard. So that is a really great thing that Disney allows because it does give you the option to save quite a bit of money on your trip if you're planning to do this. So, with this, we will typically still purchase dinner in the parks or at the resorts because it can be a little tricky to pack multiple meals to take into the parks with you, right? Lunch is pretty easy. We can do, a PB&J for the kids, a turkey sandwich, things like that. Or sometimes my husband and I, when it's really hot out, we just prefer to kind of snack. We'll have like some granola bars or some fruit, for us because we don't really want a full lunch meal. Our kids typically still eat the same amount that they would eat at home regardless. So but for us, we like to then just purchase dinner in the parks because that's a little bit easier, so we don't have to think about packing extra food to make it through all the way through a really long park day. So what we do when we're planning for this is we count out how many of each meal we need in order to plan accordingly for like groceries and stuff. So like, okay, we're gonna need 5 breakfasts, we're gonna need, 4 lunches, we're gonna, that type of thing. So we can kind of plan accordingly. But ultimately, the cost for this is going to end up being the same cost as what you would pay at home for groceries for breakfast and lunch, right? So you're not looking at a huge upcharge to your normal week to week, month to month budget for breakfast and lunch this way, which can be really helpful. Now, with dinners, you're obviously going to see an increase there. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment when we talk about like completely paying for everything out of pocket. But the only additional cost from what you normally would be spending for a week is just that upcharge of paying more for dinner when you're eating it in the park. So we really like this option. We drive down a lot, so we tend to get a lot of our like shelf stable groceries. We will just buy and bring with us in our van. You can always grab an Uber and go to Walmart or Target or wherever. You can always do a grocery delivery from, Amazon or Target or there are so many options, right? Depending on what memberships you have and all of that kind of stuff, but you can definitely get groceries delivered as well. So lots of options for that. Do keep in mind though that some of those delivery services, which I feel like it's a common knowledge, but just in case you don't know, if you're not somebody that uses it that often, typically some of those grocery delivery services do upcharge some of their items whenever you order it through like a shipped or they have like Garden Grocer down in Orlando and things like that. So just compare some costs with that if you're able to, because with the upcharges that a lot of those places do charge plus a delivery fee, it may be cheaper to grab an Uber, go get what you need, and then grab an Uber back to the resort if you don't have a car. So different options there. I would definitely price them all out to see what makes the most sense for your group and to see, if it's only a $10 difference to have it delivered versus going to get it yourself, well, then the convenience may be worth that $10 for you. But really just depends on your particular situation with that. Another option for food is the Disney dining plan. So this is like the complete opposite side of the budget, right? We talked about groceries and packing food and all of that. Now we're going to talk about the complete opposite side. So the Disney dining plan is basically you prepay for all of your meals for the entire week, and you get a certain allotment of credits on your dining plan based on what plan you get. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. But this option is really good if you can get a package where the dining plan is included. So they run a ton of different promos throughout the year where you can get certain versions of the dining plan included or completely included for everybody. It really depends, again, on the time of year and what Disney is offering. Otherwise, the cost can be debatable as to whether or not you save money or at least get your money's worth on the dining plan. Now, if you are budgeting for every and all food experience that you want, the dining plan may save you money, especially if you've got grown-ups in your group that tend to like an alcoholic beverage with their meals. This can really help with that as well. So you got to make your decision on that. Also, just note there are so many videos online about people who have done the Disney dining plan, and they show you all the tips and tricks to get the most bang for your buck with that. There's a TikToker that I follow. Her TikTok handle is Toric Coupon Hunter, and she recently did a whole mini series on how to quote unquote beat the Disney dining plan on TikTok that I really loved. So there are tons of different places that you can go and read about or watch about how people kind of use the Disney dining plan to their best advantage, if that's something that you're interested in hearing about. Now, I will mention that anybody who's listening to this close to the time that we're recording it in June of 2026, for arrivals in 2026, I believe through the end of the year. I'm not a travel agent, so don't quote me on that. Contact your favorite travel agent for more. But for arrivals in the rest of 2026, you can get a free dining plan for kids when you purchase a Disney package for you and your children that includes you staying at a Disney resort hotel. That's a really good deal. Kids eat for free, basically, is what they're giving you. So if you are planning a trip for 2026 or have already planned a trip for 2026 and you didn't see that promo, contact your travel agent, contact Disney, figure out what you can do to get that added, because that's a really good deal if you can get the free kids dining plan included in your package deal. Now, there are two different main options for the Disney dining plan if you are paying out of pocket for the dining plan. Again, this is like nothing that is included. This is if you are paying out of pocket for the Disney dining plan. These are the general 2027 prices that they've come out with because, again, 2026 prices are hard to find because they're promoting it as kids eat free. So it's a little bit tricky to find. Some of this stuff is way easier to find through a travel agent, and they're gonna have a better breakdown. The Disney website, um, it doesn't give it to you in black and white. They want you to go through, price out a vacation, add a dining plan, and see what the total is. So they don't itemize it very well for you. You have to go in and like do your own math with that. So this again is where I highly suggest looking at a travel agent to help you kind of figure out this aspect for sure. But if you are planning or looking at paying out of pocket for a dining plan in 2027, there are two main options. One is a quick service option and one is a table service option for your dining plan. So the quick service option, you get two quick service meals per day and then one snack per day or one non-alcoholic drink per day. So three items that you get per day: a quick service meal, and a snack or a non-alcoholic drink. That comes out to around $63 per day per adult and $25 per day per child. Now, the good thing is Disney has really adjusted back these Disney dining plan prices. They used to be like double this. So I think Disney has seen some of the feedback maybe from guests who have used it, and they have really kind of adjusted these prices to make it a little bit easier to have people that want to take advantage of it. Now, the table service option is for one table service meal per day, one quick service meal per day, and then again, one snack or non-alcoholic drink per day. So three options there again, a table service, a quick service, and a snack or non-alcoholic drink. That comes out to around $100 per adult per day and $32 per child per day. So that's kind of your general breakdown. Now, Disney runs promos all the time. Disney runs deals and packages all the time. So the chances of you having to pay out of pocket for a full Disney dining plan are actually fairly low currently as we look at the future of what is kind of going on with the Disney packages and everything like that. But those are your options if that's what you do choose to do. Now, there is also a deluxe dining plan option that is not currently available in 2026, but will be available again in 2027. Again, details on that are not readily available on the Disney website. So you can likely get it from a travel agent, talk to your favorite travel agent, or if you need help finding that information, send me an email, momstreetusa@gmail.com, and I can hook you up with a travel agent and we can help you figure out those numbers together. But that one is more of the table service credits. So I believe you get 2 table service credits for that one, whereas, like, quick service was 2 quick service, the table service one was 1 table service, 1 quick service. The deluxe one is 2 table services per day. So you really gotta like to eat at sit-down restaurants if you want that one. But like I said, unfortunately, I can't see the prices for that because it's available just in packages for 2027 at this point. Yeah, it's a whole thing. Like I said, Disney doesn't like to be very black and white about the dining costs, unfortunately. Now, the thing with the dining plan, again, we talked about getting your money's worth. This can be a really good option if you're already planning to eat this many meals in the Disney parks, right? So if you're already planning to eat 2 quick service meals and grab a snack for breakfast, look at the cost and see like, okay, yep, I know that at Magic Kingdom I'm planning to eat at Tony's for your table service, and then you're going to eat at Pecos Bill for your quick service. Look at what you would spend if you were to get exactly what you wanted off that menu, and then see how that breaks down to what you're going to spend on a table service plan. Or look at 2 quick services if you're going to eat at Cosmic Rays and Pinocchio Village House. Look at what you would spend there and see what that breakdown looks like. If it's going to be almost even, or you're going to be spending less than what the dining plan is giving you, well, that may help you make that decision. Now, again, if you're going in 2026, your kiddos are going to eat for free on that dining plan. So that is a huge win. Keep all those things in mind when you're planning accordingly for that option. Okay, enough about the dining plan. Let's talk about now the last option for food, kind of broad option, right? There's still so many decisions to be made, but let's just say you're going to just go and pay out of pocket for whatever you want to eat in the parks. In this category, if you're going to be paying out of pocket, you will have the most control over what you pay, right? So this is something to really consider if you want to eat at a couple maybe table services, but you don't want to do it every day, or you have like one special character meal you're planning, but then you're going to do quick services the rest of the time. Different options. It really just depends. But you will, with this option, you will need to price out every meal in order to properly budget for food. So it just really depends on if that's something that you want to do with your Disney budget. I don't mind doing this the way that we do it because I'm just planning out the dinners in the parks because everything else is already taken care of with our groceries that we get. But I am planning out every night and where I think we're going to eat, or maybe 2 options of where I think we might eat. And then I'm looking at, okay, my husband is probably going to order something in this general price range. I'm going to order something in this general price range. My kids are going to spend this much. And then I'm kind of getting a general estimate for what I think we're going to spend for that night. Now, I don't always go super specific with that unless the menu is like, "Nope, I know my kid's gonna eat that," or, like, sometimes the cost for things is just, like, a set prefix cost, right, depending on where you're going. So, like, those ones are super easy to budget for because you automatically know my kids are gonna be $29 and the adults are gonna be $54 or whatever it is, depending on where you're going and what if you do table service reservations and all those types of things. So keep that in mind as you are looking through. I enjoy doing this part of our trip because I'm a crazy lady, like I said at the beginning. So I will typically just use that spreadsheet and I usually do like a schedule on my spreadsheet, and every night I will write down where we're going to go. And then on a separate tab, I will go through and do a cost breakdown just for my own benefit, because I want to make sure that I have enough money in pocket when I go down there so I don't have to total it and tally it while I'm doing it live. So I like doing that because then it allows me to not have to think about what I'm spending because I already know, yep, I budgeted for this meal at this restaurant. I know how much we're going to spend. We're good to go kind of situation with that. One last thing that I will say when I'm talking about food in the parks is don't forget a snack budget, right? And maybe that is partially bringing some granola bars or protein bars or things into the parks, but maybe some of that is also, hey, I know we're gonna end up getting a popcorn refill every day because we brought our popcorn bucket with us, or my kids love Dole Whip. I'm gonna plan out accordingly to have money for Dole Whip. All those things are really good options to make sure that you consider that whenever you are putting together your food budget. So don't forget your snacks. It's a very important part of your Disney budget. Okay, enough talk about food. Let's talk about something else that you need for your budget, and that is travel expenses. So let's talk about how to budget for travel. This is obviously a given when it comes to budgets, but it's also one of the hardest ones to stomach sometimes, depending on how you're traveling and depending on how costs are looking at any given time. But with this, you're either close enough to drive or close enough that you're willing to drive, even if you're not super close, like me living in Ohio, who drives like 14 to 15 hours to get to Disney, or you're not, right? So either you're going to have to plan to drive or you're going to have to plan to fly. Flights have obviously skyrocketed in costs lately due to the cost of fuel going up. So using services like Google Flights, Kayak, or Hopper, all of these options can help you track flight prices, and you can sign up for alerts through them to get notifications when prices drop. That is the best way to do it if I am you. The other way to do it is to just every day you've got to get on and check some of these prices for these flights. Once you find the flights that you want, get on every day and check and see when the price might drop. I was looking for a flight for my husband for a work trip to go from Cincinnati to Las Vegas that he had to go on. And of all times, a random Friday morning at 11 a.m., the price dropped by like $100. So you never know. Historically speaking, Tuesdays tend to be the quote unquote day to book because they tend to be a cheaper day. I don't really know if that's true anymore, quite honestly. So I would set an alert every day, check those flight prices, sign up for those alerts to find the best deals that you can. And when you see them drop, just book it. The chances of it going lower can happen. It's so hard to tell with the way prices and things are going. So when you see it drop, book it. If you are someone that flies often, you probably know like what the benchmark prices that you're looking for. If you don't fly off often, reach out to some friends that fly in and out of the same airport that you do to see what kind of costs they typically see. And keep in mind that even though some of these budget airlines, like we know Spirit went under, but Frontier typically has some cheaper flights. If you can do like a Breeze Airway or some of those other ones that are a little bit more low cost, that's a great option. Or if you're someone that's got like credit card points or airline points that you can cash in, those are other great options to use to kind of help to offset that particular cost. I know for me, when I'm flying solo, I can typically find flights from Ohio to Florida for around 200. If it's under 200, I typically book it. Now, that's for me as a solo traveler. Obviously, multiply that out by your family size, but flights are not cheap, so that is a huge expense to have to kind of plan out for. And the other thing that's a little tricky is it's one of those expenses that you have to pay all at one time. With some of the other things that you pay for a Disney vacation in your like package, you can make payments as you go and it's only due, 30 days out or at the time of check-in depending on your terms and conditions. But flights are one of those things that you got to book totally all at one time, which is really unfortunate when you're trying to budget accordingly, right? And yes, our good friend Ginge in our live chat here made a really good point is booking flights in incognito mode on your browser can actually save you some money also. Because these websites will geolocate and geotrack where you are and prices can fluctuate based on that also. So if you're booking on when you're booking on a browser, try to go incognito mode. Sometimes you also will find good deals booking through an app as well. So like Southwest and Frontier will sometimes have in-app deals that if you book through the app, you can find deals. So there's lots of different things to keep in mind, and you really want to start looking at this pretty far in advance. Now, I don't necessarily suggest booking, a year and a half in advance. Sometimes you can't, right, with these airlines. But I would definitely start looking as soon as you know your dates and your dates are fairly set, even if they're maybe flexible by a day or two. You want to start looking up flight prices to give yourself an idea of what range you're currently looking at. But incognito mode is a good way to help with that. Also, now, if you're driving, other things to consider if that is your route to get there. Are you taking your own vehicle or your spouse's vehicle, a family vehicle, a friend's vehicle? Are you going to rent a larger vehicle? That's something else to consider as well. When we have gone with friends, we have always looked at, do we want to rent like a bigger SUV? Before I had my minivan, before we had, both of our kids. So it was like, well, we're going to have 4 or 5 adults. So we're going to drive down. We've got a bunch of suitcases. Do we want to rent a bigger vehicle? And we have done that on a couple occasions. Something to consider. Again, considering gas mileage and gas costs can maybe help you with that as well. If your car that you're driving gets really, really good gas mileage, maybe you consider, okay, how minimally can I pack so that we can all fit in the car because it's going to be a lot cheaper to drive my car down than it would be to drive a minivan down. Those types of decisions. It sounds really nitpicky, but it can make a several $100 difference in your budget when it comes to your travel expenses for that. Other things to consider when driving, toll roads. If you're driving down there, you're going to probably go across a toll road in Florida to get to Orlando. Considering gas fill ups, how many times you're going to have to fill up the tank, kind of mapping out, okay, we can go about this many miles. How many fill ups are we going to need and how much does it cost to fill up a tank of gas in our car that we're taking? Parking costs, if you need to consider that at your hotel. Now, this is included in your fees at your Disney resort. But if you're doing like a Good Neighbor hotel somewhere off property, somewhere in the Disney Springs area, it may or may not be included with that. So taking a look at that, if you're going to be driving and parking a car, making sure that you're not forgetting about, because some of those have parking costs that are, $30, $35 a day. That really adds up if you're there for a whole week. So different things to consider. The other thing also to consider is if you do fly, when you get there, are you renting a car? So again, you just really have to consider all of those different options. You don't necessarily need a car when you're staying on Disney property, or even if you're staying at some of those Disney Springs resorts, you can probably get away with not having a car, depending on travel needs and shuttles and all those details for your resort. But I think it's nice to have one personally, but that's my personal preference. Again, if you're staying at a Disney resort, parking is included, and you can also drive and park for free at the parks as well, which is a really nice benefit. So if you're already staying on property, you can go when you go to the parking gate for like Magic Kingdom, let's say, for the TTC. You just tell them you're staying on property. They will scan your Magic Band or your card, like your key card for your room or your account, like your wallet, your digital wallet, to confirm that you're staying on property, and then you don't have to pay for parking there as well. So all of those things are different kind of travel related ideas that you might need to plan for. Again, I don't really feel like I can give you a price range for any of that because it's so dependent on how you're getting there, what size your party is, where you're coming from, all of those things to be considered to help you kind of budget for travel. But that, again, that travel expense is going to be one of the biggest expenses that you're going to have you to get you down to Disney, simply because right now fuel costs are insane and through the roof. And Ginge made another really good point in our live chat here. Thanks, Ginge. Shout out to you for helping. But you can do certain things like Afterpay for flights. So there's lots of different little options with that. Like I know through my Chase account, I can split certain transactions into multiple smaller payments. So different things like that you can look at as well. Also, if you're planning to use it on a credit card, obviously don't put yourself into debt by planning to buy flights to Disney if you can, at all avoid it. But putting it on a credit card and paying it off little by little can also be an option if that's something that you need to do in the meantime. Okay, I think that's enough about travel. Ugh, that part always stresses me out. It's so expensive. I keep thinking about this because we're planning Disneyland in a couple years, and I keep dreading in the next 2 years what's going to happen to flight costs to get me out there. So we will see. We will see. But I am already starting to budget and save for that trip because it's going to be a lot to get 4 of us out to Disneyland. So let's talk about something a little bit more enjoyable and something we maybe have a little bit more control over how much we pay for, and that is your hotel cost. But this is another big part of your decision for a Disney trip, right? Your travel costs and your hotel and your tickets. Those are your big 3 of the 5 that we're talking about today. First decision that you need to make is, are you trying to stay on property or off property? And then second decision from that is, what level resort fits your wants and your needs for your particular group. This aspect, again, is really where travel agents can help you decide based on your needs. Most rooms at Disney resorts, I'm going to focus kind of on Disney resorts because that is what I have the most knowledge on. We'll talk a little bit about Good Neighbor resorts here in just a moment, but most of the resorts and the rooms at the resorts are standard rooms that will sleep 4. Some will sleep 5. They'll have a 5th sleeper option for a smaller individual that is traveling with you. Some rooms at the deluxe properties, that's your highest tier budget wise, can sleep up to like 8 or 12, again, depending on your price range. Because if you're looking at that many people, you're looking at like villas and things that have multiple bedrooms, and some of those more expensive options for that size are going to be in that highest price range. So some things to consider with that: if you've got a bigger party, consider splitting your group and requesting adjoining rooms. Consider what the needs are of each maybe family in your group. So we did this for our last family trip that we took last May. We were there with my extended, or like my entire immediate family. So in my immediate family was my parents, my sister, her husband and their 2 kids, me and my husband and our 2 kids. So there were 10 of us total. And I looked at some of those bigger, like, deluxe villas and things like that, but the price breakdown just didn't really make sense for what we wanted and what we needed. So what we opted to do was, my sister, her youngest was under a year. So we wanted to make sure that for her youngest, they had a good place for naps and for earlier bedtimes. So we opted to look at the Art of Animation family suites because they had a separate like master bedroom, and then they had, the kitchen and the TV and the other bathroom were out in a space where they could be away from their youngest. So to us, it made sense to book them one of those rooms. And then we wanted to be close by. So we opted to book the Little Mermaid rooms also at Art of Animation for my 4, my husband and myself and my 2 kids, and then for my parents, and we just requested adjoining rooms. So our rooms were adjoining, we had that double door in between so we could, get in and out of each other's, space and spend some time together and all of that. And then my sister and her husband had their own space where their kiddos could be, so that worked out beautifully for us. But that's what I mean when I'm saying if you've got those bigger groups, you really need to consider what you're looking at because there are so many different options and different makeups. Now, most of the resorts will be able to do like adjoining rooms or rooms like next door to each other if you put that in a request whenever you book. That again is where travel agents can help because our lovely travel agent that we used was able to put that request in for us. And that was no problem whenever we checked in. They were able to accommodate that easy peasy. A couple things to note back at the beginnings of Mom Street USA, Kate and I went through all of the different resorts and we talked in depth about each category and what all your options were there. Now, from those, that was like season 1 of Mom Street, way, way, way back when. Pricing may have changed. I'm sure it probably has increased, unfortunately, from when we talked about it. But the overviews of all of the resorts that we did in those episodes are still the same. So if you want more details about the different resorts on Disney property, we actually did Disney World and Disneyland. But if you want more information about those different resort options, go there and see. Now, if you guys find that we need an update of that, just let me know. Comment below and tell me, like, hey, would love an update on those episodes so that way we can give you guys kind of a more up to date look because that was probably 4 years ago almost at this point, which is wild to think about. So let me know in the comments if we need an update on those resort episodes for you guys. But you can definitely still find some of the information as far as like overviews and what each resort has to offer over there on those episodes. If you go back into the archives and you can find those wherever you're listening to us, if it's YouTube, if it's Spotify, if it's Apple, wherever you're listening to us, that is available for you to find. Now, let's talk about general price ranges. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty. We're not going to break down every single resort because that's not what this episode is aimed at doing. But I will say that these ranges can at least give you an idea per night of what you're going to be looking at if you're looking at different levels of these resorts. There are 3 different categories of Disney resorts. There's a value, moderate, and deluxe. So, value category is your lowest tier as far as cost goes. There are 5 in this category: Pop Century, Art of Animation, and 3 All Stars. So, All Star music, movies, and sports. Those, generally speaking, range around 150 up to about 300 a night, and that is going to depend heavily on when you're visiting. The lower costs are going to be in that off season. The higher costs are going to be around the holidays, Christmas, and the busier times throughout the year. Your second category is the moderate category. That is going to be things like Caribbean Beach, Port Orleans resorts, Riverside and French Quarter, Coronado Springs. Those are going to range you 275 a night, upwards of 450 a night. Again, depending on time of year, what's going on, availability, all that jazz. And then your deluxe category, this one has a much wider price range because this is where you're going to see all of those like villas and the fancy bungalows at the Polynesian and all of that. But that is the Contemporary, Grand Floridian, Animal Kingdom Lodge, Polynesian, all of those types of resorts, Riviera. I didn't list all of them. There's like 15 in this category, I think. But those range anywhere from around 500 to 900 for like a standard room option. And then they go up from there upwards of 3,000 if you're paying for villas with club level and resort or a park view and all of that. So tons of different options. It's hard to kind of put you in a price range without knowing, right? Like what your budget is. Are you looking to do it on a budget? Are you looking to splurge a little? Are you looking to splurge a lot? So kind of think about where you may fall. Because the other thing to consider with that is also the amenities that come with it. So value amenities are going to be very basic. You're going to have a basic food court. They have themed like swimming pools, but they don't have slides. They don't have huge elaborate splash pad areas at the value resorts. Your moderate level is going to give you a little bit more elevated food options. It's going to give you bigger splash pad areas, water slides, if those things are important to you. And then obviously your deluxe is going to give you all that in a bag of chips, right? So, thinking about your amenities as well as your price range is really important too. If you've got kiddos that love pool time, or you're someone that loves pool time and you want to give them access to splash pads and water slides, the moderate level at the minimum is what you're going to need to look at. So, keeping that in mind also when you're looking to budget can be a big thing to consider too. Now, if you are going off property, let's talk just briefly about going off property. Let's say you're looking at one of these Good Neighbor hotels that Disney offers. And a Good Neighbor hotel is basically a hotel that Disney recommends that is not on their property, but Disney says, like, yes, they get our stamp of approval. They're a good place to stay nearby. There are more good neighbor properties out in Disneyland than there are at Disney World, just because Disneyland only has 3 resorts out there, but there's still a huge amount of them, and a lot of these are found near the Disney Springs area at Walt Disney World. But if you're looking at these hotels, I would highly suggest looking for the Good Neighbor hotels that still get some of the Disney benefits. And what I mean by that is some of these Good Neighbor hotels still get the like 7 days out lightning lane access, which is a really big benefit. And a lot of these still get the early entry benefit, which again is another really great perk to have for not staying on property. You still get to get in that 30 minutes early to the park for the day. So I'm just going to run down a list in case you are someone that's like, "Ooh, I want to know what it is that we're looking at for that." So with the lightning lane benefit, and again, if you need more help on lightning lanes, I've done a ton of episodes, or send me an email, momstreetusa@gmail.com. But you can book 7 days out of your check-in day if you're staying on property, or if you're staying at the Dolphin, the Swan Reserve, which those are all Marriott owned, or Shades of Green, which is the military resort. So those 4 will still get you that 7 days out booking availability if you are trying to do lightning lanes. So that is a massive perk of doing that, especially if you're someone that frequents Marriott resorts and you have like points and things like that that you can use to book over there. That's really good to know. The other thing to know is that those Marriott resorts, so the Dolphin, the Swan, and the Swan Reserve, will also do an annual pass discount. So if you are an annual pass holder and you're coming down, maybe you're looking for somewhere new to stay, somewhere you haven't been before, they will do an annual pass discount there as well. So all of those things are good little perks to keep in mind. Now, if you aren't worried about lightning lanes, but you want the early entry benefit is given to, this is a long list. I'm just going to read through it quickly and then you can do your research thusly. But the Dolphin, Swan Reserve, the Doubletree Suites by Hilton, the Drury Plaza Hotel Orlando Lake Buena Vista, the Four Seasons, the Hilton, both Hilton Orlando locations, the Holiday Inn Orlando, the Renaissance Orlando Resort and Spa, Shades of Green, obviously, the Signia by Hilton, the Waldorf Astoria, Wyndham Garden Lake, and the Wyndham Lake Buena Vista. So those options are all really great if you want to do early entry and you are not staying on property. One of the other perks that you can utilize if you are staying at select Good Neighbor resorts is the extended evening theme park hours, is what they call them for Disney Deluxe resorts. So this is a certain time, usually twice a week, typically Mondays and Wednesdays. You get like an extra 2 bonus hours after park close to still be in the resorts. So they offer this for all of the deluxe resorts, but they also again offer this for the Swan, the Dolphin, the Swan Reserve, and Shades of Green. So those 3, now obviously you have to qualify to stay at Shades of Green because it is a military resort. But if you are someone that is able to get good deals through the Dolphin, the Swan, and the Swan Reserve, those are fantastic options for off-property, not technically owned by Disney resorts, because you get early entry, you get deluxe hours, and you get 7-day lightning lane booking. You're basically staying on property, while still earning points for your Marriott account. So take that for what it is. If one of those makes sense to you, I highly suggest doing that. And I've heard great things. The Swan and Dolphin are located kind of in the boardwalk-ish area. If you're familiar with Disney property but don't really know where the Swan and Dolphin are, that's where you can find them. So they are technically within walking distance to Epcot International Gateway and Hollywood Studios. There are also boats and things like that that will take you there, but that is where they are on property. So they're really convenient locations and they're really convenient price range typically. They usually will fall in that moderate price range, but you get all the benefits of being at a deluxe resort. So take that info again for what it is, but I highly suggest considering one of those if you're looking, quote unquote, off property for your resort. So, okay, I think that's kind of a general breakdown of hotels. Again, we're not getting into the nitty gritty. If you need help figuring out what works best for you, send me an email, contact a travel agent. That's going to be your best bet to get true individualized information based on your needs for your resort hotel. Now, the last category that we are going to talk about today for our realistic Disney budget is merch, souvenirs, and other expenses. So, your limit and budget for this category is obviously completely up to your specific situation. For us, we do our very best to keep ourselves on a budget for merch. However, we're also really bad at keeping ourselves on a budget for merch. Specifically, more my husband and I. The adults are really bad. We're really good at keeping our kids on a budget. So take that for what it is. We know it's a flaw when we go to Disney. It's just how it works. But when we budget with our kids, what we typically like to do is we give them their budgeted allotment that we are going to give them on a Disney gift card because this helps them track what money they have to spend and allows them to see if they have any left. They print that right on the receipt after they make their purchase. So we like to do that for them because it makes it easier for them. It makes it more visible for them to know exactly how much they have left to spend. Now, we also will sometimes let them contribute their own money that they have from birthdays or doing chores around the house as well. But we typically set that limit before we go. Sometimes we will add that to their Disney gift card. Sometimes we will just say, nope, mom and dad will take care of that extra amount and we'll equal things out with you whenever we get back from our trip. If you've got older kiddos, you may do something where you send them their budget electronically, right? If they're using a phone or a smartwatch, you may send them a Disney gift card that they can put in their wallet. You may do like a Venmo or an Apple Pay or that type of thing. Also, I know a lot of parents with teens like to do that because then they can give them their allotment on their phone. They can use their phone to pay, and then it also shows them directly there on the screen how much money they have left. So, whatever method you choose to use for your kids, I highly suggest something that is visible for them to be able to watch those numbers so that they get an idea of what they have left to spend. Now, when it comes to budgeting for the grown-ups in your group, you're going to have to figure out the best way to keep that in check. Obviously, I have not figured that out yet because my husband and I are both merchandise enablers when it comes to finding things that we like at the Disney parks that we want to purchase. So, you know, I'm maybe not the best person to talk about merchandise budgets. But a couple other things with merchandise that you can do ahead of time to kind of prep, bringing and packing things like bubble wands, glow sticks, things that you know are going to catch the eye of your kiddos can help you save the hassle of having to do some of that extra purchasing, right? You maybe want something that your kiddo can take home with them for their souvenir and will like use or play with or wear. Well, a bubble wand may or may not be a good option for your kiddo. But you can plan ahead of time with those purchases to have them ready to go so you don't have to worry about buying them in parks. The other thing you can do is chat with your kiddo ahead of time if they're old enough, right, to kind of be able to have this conversation about what types of merchandise they may see when you go down there. So you can talk about, like, okay, when we're in the shops, you're going to see things from clothing to Lego sets to plushies to play sets to pins to, all of those categories. And you may be able to, through that conversation, get an idea of what type of item or what category of item they might want to buy. You may have a girl that really wants a new pair of mini ears. You may have a boy that really wants a new Disney hat to wear. It really just depends on your kiddo and if you think they are like old enough to kind of comprehend that and have that conversation, right? So like for example, when we talk about those types of things with our kiddos, my kiddos are currently almost 10 and almost 8. My oldest, massive Lego fan. So we know that we've got to get him to Disney Springs to go to the Lego store and that's likely where he's going to spend a portion of his money, if not all of his money, depending on how much we have budgeted for the particular trip. Now, my youngest loves plushies, blankets, soft items. So we know that she's going to be keeping her eye out for certain plushies, certain characters, certain toys as we go throughout the parks. Those are really good things for you as a parent to have in mind when it comes to the merch because otherwise it can be really overwhelming. The other thing to consider is Disney merchandise, depending on what it is, items can sometimes sell out quickly. So I hate to be of the mindset of like when you see it, you need to buy it. But when you see it, you kind of need to buy it, or you need to get some intel maybe from a cast member on whether or not it's a super popular item if you're unsure. Also, keep in mind that certain types of merchandise may be easier to find at certain parks. So, if you've got a kiddo that's into Star Wars or Toy Story, that's going to be really easy to find at Hollywood Studios. If you've got a kiddo that's into like animal based movies, Up, The Lion King, those movies, that's going to be found most easily at like an Animal Kingdom. Animal Kingdom also just tends to get a lot of merch, like really good new merch lines at their stores for whatever reason. Take that for what it is. Movies that take place in like specific countries, you're gonna be able to find that kind of stuff at Epcot. So like Winnie the Pooh, Alice in Wonderland, Mary Poppins, that stuff's gonna be at the UK pavilion at Epcot. So you can kind of plan accordingly if you know, generally speaking, what they like and what they're gonna be looking for, you can kind of plan accordingly. Magic Kingdom is kind of a catch-all, right? You've got the Emporium there that's got a ton of different merchandise. Disney Springs, World of Disney at Disney Springs is the biggest merch store on property. So when in doubt, if you're looking for something specific, head to Disney Springs and go to World of Disney. Now, your kids may surprise you when you get there. They may pick something out that you never anticipated them wanting. That's just how it goes sometimes, right? But you can do your best to plan accordingly to try to help guide them because it can be overwhelming, especially for little kids that are not used to like walking into a store that is filled with toys that they want to buy, right? So keep that in mind because it can just be extremely overwhelming when it comes to that. Now, you also have the ability to look at merch at different resorts. Some of the merch will be resort specific. Not every resort always has resort specific merchandise though, so keep that in mind. But a lot of the places will have like resort specific like cups or ears or shirts. So there's just so there's so much to look for when it comes to the merchandise. So do some looking online, kind of figure out what categories you're looking for so that way you can plan accordingly with that. The other note that I will make is if there is something specific you're looking for, or like a certain size of a shirt that you don't see at whatever location you're at, ask the merchandising cast members if they have it, first of all. And if they don't, ask them and see if they can check the database because typically your merchandising cast members are able to look up on their little devices or on their computer system where that item is across property and what locations are reporting it as in stock or is it sold out across property, right? So be sure to ask them to see. Now, they can't always look stuff up, and this is usually only like there are stores at Disney Springs that this will not apply for. So, like World of Disney, you can ask them to look it up. Anything that is like Disney owned and operated, you can ask them to look it up. Everything in the parks, everything in the resorts, you can ask them to look up, but not everything at Disney Springs. But like World of Disney, you can absolutely, if you don't see a size of something that you're looking for, ask the cast member. And if they don't find it at their location, you can ask and see if they know if it's anywhere else across property, just to give you a general idea. It's not a sure thing, but it'll at least give you an idea of maybe, oh, this is a really hard item to find, or, oh, yeah, they totally have it at all these other locations. This location just happens to be out of the large in this shirt that I want. So, other things to consider with merchandise and souvenirs. The other thing in this kind of extras category to consider are any of these like magical extras that you may be planning for in your budget. If that's building a droid or building a lightsaber, if that's going to the Bibbidi Boppity Boutique, if that is doing a capture your moment photography session, any of those extras, all the tours and stuff that you can do at like Animal Kingdom or any of the other spaces across property. Those are other things to consider when you're budgeting as well. So if you're really wanting to splurge on like a special activity or a special event, uh, fireworks, dessert parties. There are so many options that Disney offers. So take that into consideration as well when you're looking at your budget because you want to make sure, Bibbidi Boppity Boutique has like three or four or five different packages that you can purchase on there. There are different options and levels for some of the tours that you can do at Animal Kingdom if you're looking for a special experience for your group. Those are all things to consider also when you're doing your budgeting because you want to make sure that you have planned out enough money for that on top of the other money that you're already planning for the rest of your trip. So, all of those little extras can add up. I highly suggest with this category, um, padding your budget a little bit, right? Because you want to make sure that you're not going to put yourself into credit card debt by grabbing an extra pair of mini ears for your kiddo, right? So pad that budget a little bit, give yourself a little bit of extra spending room when it comes to merchandise, souvenirs, and extras. Kind of in the same way that you want to give yourself a little bit more padding in your food budget for snacks. This is kind of that same way also as well. Before we wrap here, I do just want to give you a few ideas for ways to help you save. And we've gone through this in other episodes as well on Mom Street. So again, hop back into our archives. We did like a whole ways to save for Disney episode, but a couple different options that you have. Several locations will have discounted Disney gift cards that you can purchase. You can also use discounted or the ability to buy discounted gift cards for like gas cards or like I know like Southwest Airlines will have discounted gift cards through like Sam's Club. Look for those everywhere you go. Target has them, Costco has them, Sam's Club has them, BJ's has them, lots of different places. Do some quick Googling online to see what locations near you or what locations you may have like a card, like a membership card to that you can find those. Cause like Targets are only discounted if you have a red card. Sam's Club, Costco, BJ's, you have to have a membership card to have access to that. The other thing to also look at for that is that you can sometimes book cheaper travel through like Costco and Sam's Club through their travel portals. So, same thing goes for like insurance, AAA, those places as well. You can also use different savings apps. I use one called Capital, where it will let me set like a savings goal, and then I can set different deposit amounts that I want to. So, like, I can have it set like $50 a week goes into this particular one, or every paycheck I put 5% into this account for vacations. Those can be really helpful because you can kind of just set it, forget it, and let it go. The same thing can be said for if you are someone who already has like a high interest savings account. You can dedicate a portion of that to go to to your vacations, right? And that can just be like a rolling vacation fund that you have. We've got one of those that we use for other expenses and things. So it can be one of those where you don't necessarily have to open a new account, but maybe you've already got access to a more higher interest savings account that you can put money into. Because when you do things like through the Capital app, that doesn't gain interest. the money just sits there. So you have to be really smart about what you're doing with that, because if that money could be in an account that is going to gain interest, that's probably a better off way for you to save, especially if you're starting early. So like right now, we have already started to save for our Disneyland trip 2 years in the future. I can use our high interest savings account to help gain a little bit, right, as we get closer to the time when we're going to have to start paying for stuff. So, all of those options are really great. You can also just go the old school method of cashing out your paycheck, grabbing a 20 or two 20s and putting it in an envelope for later. I see a lot of people that do like binder methods where they'll cash out their paycheck and they'll put cash in different envelopes for different things. Again, just be really smart about how you're doing it. If you're starting to save far in advance, I would suggest some sort of method that gets you a little bit of interest if you're able to, because that's going to be quote unquote free money towards your vacation. So, keep that in mind. Those are all really good, just kind of basic overview things to think about when it comes to saving. So, with all of that information, hopefully, this is a helpful overview for giving yourself a realistic Disney budget. I know budgeting is not super fun, but hopefully, this broke it down in different ways that you can consider and different things and pathways that you can think about when it comes to creating your own Disney budget for your trip. If you are someone that still needs extra help kind of figuring out what resort should I go to, how many park days should I do? Should I do a hopper or not? This is my family makeup. Send me an email, momstreetusa@gmail.com. I'm happy to look over and make suggestions, or I'm also happy to connect you to a travel agent. I've got several friends that are amazing travel agents. So I'm happy to connect you to any one of them if you are in need of someone to help you with your most magical Disney vacation. We can also continue the conversation, as always, on all of our social media accounts at Mom Street USA. Our Patreon account is a really great way to connect with us over there as well. And you know what? Maybe I'll share some screenshots of my planning spreadsheets that I use over there, so you guys can take a look at how I kind of break things down for my particular groups. If that's something you're interested in, let me know. But for now, that will wrap up this episode of Mom Street USA. Coming up next week, we will be doing a episode that was requested actually by our community members here, which is another episode on Disney without a park ticket, fun resort and non-park day ideas. So we're going to be talking about things that you can do outside of going to the parks, which may help alleviate your budget. Look at that. It's a tie-in. I love it. But so make sure you come back for that episode. But for now, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for your support. And I will see you on the next episode of Mom Street USA. Bye, everyone.